And thus, in this simple manner, the best title of all to kingly right commends the temporal sovereignty of the popes. And meekly stepping to the throne of Caesar, notice the terminology, meekly stepping to the throne of Caesar, the vicar of Christ took up the scepter to which the emperors and kings of Europe were to bow in reverence through so many ages. Here's another statement from another historian, Karl Conrad Eckhart. He says, under the Roman Empire, the popes had no temporal powers. In other words, they had no political power. But when the Roman Empire had disintegrated, and its place had been taken by a number of rude, barbarous kingdoms, those are the 10 divisions, the 10 horns, the Roman Catholic Church not only became independent of the states in religious affairs, but dominated secular affairs as well. R.W. Southern, another historian. These are all, by the way, non-Adventist theologians and historians. R.W. Southern says this, during the whole medieval period, there was in Rome a single spiritual and temporal, that is civil, temporal authority, exercising powers which in the end exceeded those that had ever lain within the grasp of the Roman emperor. And John N. Figi has this interesting comment. He says, in the Middle Ages, the church was not a state. It was the state. Or rather, the civil authority for a separate society was not recognized, was merely the police department of the church. Are you catching the picture of what this is talking about? What was the sword that the Roman Catholic papacy had in its hand? It was the sword, not of the Bible. It didn't use the Bible to persuade or to kill people. It used the civil power to accomplish its purposes, which it took over when the Roman Empire fell. By the way, it's interesting to read a bull by a Pope, Boniface VIII. It was written in the year 1302. The name of the bull is Unam Sanctam. And notice how he interprets the two swords. He says this, we are informed by the texts of the Gospels that in this church, that is the Roman Catholic Church, and in its power are two swords. So the church has how many swords? According to the Bible, how many swords does the church have? One. According to the Roman Catholic Church, how many swords does he have? Two. Notice. We are informed by the text of the Gospels that in this church and in its power are two swords, namely the spiritual and the temporal. Both, therefore, are in the power of the church. That is to say, the spiritual and the material sword. But the former, that is the spiritual, is to be administered for the church. But the latter, that is the temporal, by the church. The former in the hands of the priest. In other words, Scripture in hand of the priests. And the latter by the hands of kings and soldiers. That's the temporal sword. But notice how it ends. But at the will and sufferance of the priest.